What's up guys, it's Jay with Bearded Dad Fishing, and today I'm sharing with you 13 kayak rigging mistakes that you're probably making right now. Things that could mess up your setup and your time on the water. And the last few are huge, so make sure you stick around. But first, dad joke of the day: why did the quarry feel underappreciated? Everyone took it for granted. And that dad joke is brought to us by Corey of Bucktail Fishing from our Facebook group, Kayak Fishing Dads. And the first mistake is too many mods too soon. We all love to mod our kayaks, and that's totally okay. You've been doing research for hours upon hours. However, if you're just getting your kayak, and especially if you're a new kayak angler, I suggest hold off on the mods. Wait until you get a better feeling on your kayak, a better bearing when you're on the water, and then you can make decisions about what you like about your kayak, what you want to change about your kayak, and what you have to put up with your kayak so that you can make the changes by modding. A lot of times what we end up doing is getting all these mods, and then we end up either not using them or not wanting them because we didn't spend enough time on our kayak. So I highly recommend take out your kayak with minimal mods, all right? Minimal, nothing if possible, because then you can figure out what you really like about your kayak and what changes you're gonna make. And in addition to wasting money on mods you're not using, this can also overcomplicate your setup. This could be a huge turnoff to brand new kayak anglers because you want to get out on the water, and the thing about kayaks is that you can go throw it in the back of your truck, get out on the water quick. But now if you got a motor and you got to set up your battery and you got to set up your fish finder and you got to set up your live scope and this and this and that, now your staging might take 20-25 minutes instead of the 5 minutes to just throw it out the bed of your truck and get on the water. And this could be a point where new kayak anglers decide, this may not really be for me, when in reality the mistake was that they loaded up with too much too soon on the modifications. Something that I bought right off the bat that I ended up really not using is my rod holder from Yak Attack. I love Yak Attack and everything that they have to offer. However, I really don't need that extra rod holder, mostly because I have a forward-facing rod holder on this kayak and on my autopilot and on my EPDL Plus. So I don't really need that additional rod holder because I don't do trolling either. So that's 40 bucks I could have saved and put towards something else. And rigging mistake number 2 is drilling holes you don't need. We get this brand new kayak, and I know it's scary drilling holes. However, it's even worse when you're drilling holes for things that you don't need. And a lot of it is a byproduct of the first mistake, too many mods too soon. Now you're drilling holes in this bad boy for things you're not going to use, things you don't want to use, or you end up not needing. But also think ahead for what changes you might do down the road. So if you're, for instance, installing a fish finder on your kayak and you drill a hole for your through hole kit, for your battery, for your mount, and you have your fish finder set up, well, next year if you add another screen or if you add your live scope, how is that going to change things up? So try to think ahead, and think ahead when it comes to where you're putting everything on your kayak. The best thing you could do is use the rails that already come on your kayak. A lot of fishing kayaks come with rails already, some more than others, of course, but use your rails up because then you don't have to add holes on your kayak. And a little pro tip when it comes to drilling holes is try to drill in areas that you can replace the part. So for instance, if you want to drill on your front hatch, you could put a through hole kit right through here and feed the wire into the battery that's sitting in there without having to drill one over here or over here or over there. And then that way, if you ever change your mind later, you can buy another lid from Old Town for 20, 30, 40 bucks instead of just having to cover up a hole or deal with a setup that wasn't really something that you liked. And speaking about fish finders, kayak rigging mistake number 3 is getting a fish finder too soon. There is such a thing as too soon, and that's kind of been the theme here. But if you get a fish finder too soon, you might be regretting it. One thing is that it could lead to information overload, especially if you're a new angler or even a new kayak angler. You're learning a lot of things. You're learning how to launch your kayak, how to pedal maybe, how to set up your motor, and all these different things when it comes to kayak fishing. And then you have to add something else on it, because learning how to use a fish finder is not a night and day thing. There's a bit of a learning curve. Not that it's ultra complicated, but you want it to be something you could focus on when you're on the water. Instead of learning all the things about fishing, all the things about being on your kayak, all the things about what you can and can't do on your kayak, and then adding a fish finder, it's better to kind of get all that firm grasp first before jumping into a fish finder. And like I said before, this adds to the complexity of your kayak setup, especially for new anglers. You just want to throw and go on the kayak ramp. Well, now you got to get your battery, you got to worry about your wiring and your through haul kits and everything else. It just adds to that information overload, adds to that time staging before you get on the water, the time it takes you to clean up after you're done fishing. All this stuff, you're better off learning it first, learning fishing, the sport of kayak fishing, before getting into too many electronics, specifically a fish finder, too soon. And kayak rigging mistake number 4 is actually quite dangerous, and that's using the wrong gauge wires and plug for your electronics. When it comes to your wiring for your electronics, whether it's your motor, your fish finder, your lights, anything like that, you want to make sure you're using the proper gauge wire. What happens is people end up trying to make their own harnesses or run the length of the kayak without checking the manufacturer specifications for what gauge wire you should be running. And this can cause a plethora of issues, including overheating. Your whole setup can get hot because it's running on wires that are way too thin. It can cause a fire too when you're on the water. That's the last thing you want to do. Whether you're on the water, if it's on your trailer, on the road, in your garage, you don't want that fire risk by using the wrong gauge wires and plugs. You can also get voltage drops, which means it's not giving you the correct voltage on your motor or your fish finder or your lights, and it's gonna make that accessory not work well. You can also blow fuses, ruin batteries, which lithium batteries, although they're cheaper now, they're still not cheap. You're talking about a couple $100. Or even worse, complete system failure. So make sure you check with the manufacturer before you decide to run wires. It's totally fine if you run your own, you can buy them, but just use the right gauge wires and plugs for your electronics. And kayak rigging mistake number 5 is taking too much gear on your setup. Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to take everything and the kitchen sink with you on the water. The first problem this can create is you're going over your weight capacity. Every kayak has a specific weight capacity, and sometimes that weight capacity includes the kayak hull, or sometimes it doesn't. However, it always includes you, the angler. It includes the gear you take with you, your batteries, your motors, your setup, everything. So you could be pushing the brink of your weight capacity of the kayak without even knowing it. So not only are you getting closer to that weight capacity or are over that weight capacity, but now your setup is slow and it's more work to paddle, to pedal, or even to power, which means it's gonna drain more of your battery. In addition to the weight capacity issue, taking too much gear on your setup also leads to overcrowding. So you're already in a small vessel, but if you're surrounded with your rails on both sides and on the back with gear and everything else, you could feel kind of closed in, a little bit claustrophobic, and things like that. And it complicates your loading and setup time. Again, the more gear you have, the longer it takes to get ready to launch and take everything out of your car to the kayak, take the kayak to the water, and do the reverse when you're done fishing. Do yourself a favor, don't take everything with you. You're gonna appreciate having the lighter vessel, being a little bit faster, having a little bit more energy in your legs and your arms from paddling and pedaling, with having a lighter setup. And let's be honest, most of the stuff you take with you on the water, you're not gonna use all of it. You might not even use half of it. My big thing when I first started was that I would take all my lures that I had with me in my tackle box. And while it didn't add a ton of weight to my setup, it did add to the complication of what I should throw, because here I am learning not just kayak fishing, but fishing in general. And then I have all these things that I'm not gonna throw. I'm not gonna throw these big giant swim baits when I'm just learning to fish. And before we get to number 6, if you're not part of our community, make sure you find us on our Facebook group at Kayak Fishing Dads. We have more than 40,000 members from all over the world sharing their kayak setups, asking questions, showing pictures. It's a great place to be. Make sure you find us on Facebook at our group called Kayak Fishing Dads. And kayak rigging mistake number 6 is having the incorrect power supply, aka having too little power or too much power on your kayak. And you might be asking, why is that a problem? Well, first of all, if you have too little power on your setup, whether it's for a motor or for your electronic setup, then you're gonna run out of power on the water, and nobody wants to be in that situation. So I have my Amped Outdoors 36 volt 20 amp hour battery that I have for my EPDL Plus 120 Pro, but I have to be realistic. This is a 20 amp hour battery. I know what I can get out of it, and I know what I should not be able to get out of it. If I'm gonna be on the rivers running this motor on 5 all day long, I'm not gonna get all day power out of it. But on the flip side, having too much power creates the issue of now you have all this weight and space taken up on your kayak that otherwise didn't need to be there. If you're powering a Garmin Striker 4 with a 50 amp hour battery, that is too much juice. You could probably run that for 2 weeks without running out of power. And remember, every single pound that you could save on your kayak setup will make you lighter, faster. It'll make you less tired when you're pedaling, or saving your battery power on your motor. Kayak rigging mistake number 7 is poor weight distribution. And I have a great example of this because on my Old Town Sportsman PDL 120, I have my motor on my left-hand side of the kayak, right? It's not centered like some of them because I have a rudder here. So I have it on this side. When I went out fishing recently, I accidentally put my battery, which sits in my Blackpack Pro, I had it on this side, which is the same side as the motor. Look at that, everything came out. As the motor, and I noticed when I was on the water that I was like slanted to the side a little bit, and it took me a little bit to figure out why that was. But the second that I took that battery and plopped it over here and switched everything around, it made a huge difference. But the same could be said about front to back weight distribution. So for example, if you're running a bow mounted trolling motor right here, and you have your battery right here, 100 amp hour battery right in front, now you have, maybe 35, 45 pounds right on the front of your kayak. And if you're a smaller dude and you're sitting here, your kayak could be riding dirty like this at an angle, and that's gonna set you up for more water coming over your bow. It's gonna feel uneven. It might feel slower in the water, which drains your battery faster. All sorts of things that if you just evenly distribute it, for example, in that same situation, you run that battery, the wiring all the way to the back, and you keep that battery back here in your Blackpack or behind it or whatever, then it's gonna feel better on the water. And kayak rigging mistake number 8 is not testing your setup before you get on the water. That could be a huge hang up for folks because they get excited. They just rigged up their new motor, they just rigged up their new lights or whatever, and then they get out on the water and it doesn't work. It's discouraging. And the thing is, a lot of things can happen because of Murphy's Law. What can happen will happen. That's the same when it comes to kayak rigging. Wires can easily become loose, connections could fail, fuses could be bad, all sorts of things. So you want to make sure you test out your setup before you get on the water, and certainly before a big tournament or a big trip. Last thing you want to do is get out there and your fish finder's not working and it's a brand new lake, you're with your boys and you're looking real lame with no fish finder. This actually happened to me last year when I went out to Raystown with Jake and Juan, and I get out on the water with my fresh new live scope, my fish finder and everything, just to find out it wasn't working because I didn't test it at home. I thought I tested it and maybe some things were working, but one of the connectors went bad either on the trip or while we were over there and I couldn't use my fish finder, my lights, nothing. But it can easily happen to anyone. So make sure you test everything before you go out in the water, and especially before a big trip. And a pro tip, have a checklist before you go out fishing, and that way you never forget nothing. You can just check them off, write down the list, and have one of those on there. Do a test of your electronics before you leave. And rigging mistake number 9 is not properly securing your gear. This could result in losing a whole lot of expensive and awesome gear on the water, either by tipping or by getting caught up in branches or whatever. So make sure you secure your gear. So here I have my Blackpack Pro by Yak Attack, the 16x16, and I got it secured 2 ways. First and foremost, with the bungee system. So the Old Town kayaks come with this awesome bungee system. Most kayaks do, so if you don't have one or your kayak doesn't have one, you can add it later on, some bungees. But the other way I have it connected is through these little cam straps right here. So I replaced this rear mounted rod holder with a track from Navarre Fishing, where I could put the vertical tie down from Yak Attack and run the cam strap right through to the handle, holding it down. And that actually ensures that I can ride with this in my trailer without having to tear it down, put it in my car every time when I'm done fishing or on my way to the lake. And on this side, I have the same thing. I have it connected to this vertical tie down and to this handle right here. There's a lot of different ways to secure your gear, but this is also a good example of not drilling extra holes. So instead of putting a track right here, I was able to just get this mount from Navarre Kayak Fishing and be able to hold it in here and drill less holes in my kayak. You can use tethers and leashes to keep a lot of your gear that doesn't float from falling and losing it into the water. However, just be wary because a lot of leashes can cause a tangling hazard. Lord forbid you fall into the water and now you're tangled up with 5 or 10 different leashes. So leash what doesn't float, but also eliminate the leashes you don't need. So a good way of doing that for your rod specifically is by using rod floats. So this little orange float right here, you can see it sticking out. It looks like a tiny pool noodle, which is essentially what it is, with a slit in it. It wraps around the rod, and then it has a little Velcro strap around it. That's a great way to not have to leash down your rod. So if I drop my rod in the water, which happened a couple of times, I know it will float. It floats because that gives it just enough buoyancy where it won't sink. However, if I fall over, I don't have to worry about having 6 rods with 6 leashes all over. Yak Attack also has the leashes that are connected, and they're the bungee ones. So if you wanted to leash them down that way, the only hassle that makes is that every time you turn around to grab a rod, you have to unstrap it, and I don't want to do that. So I have those rod floats on each one of my rods. And I'll put a link down below so you could check out those rod floats and everything else that I'm showing you in this video. Kayak rigging mistake number 10 is overcomplicating your setup. Less is more. Listen to me. You don't need everything expensive, everything big, everything right away to catch fish. How many guys you know can catch fish and they don't have an expensive setup? I know guys that are out there in a Tamarack or an Ascend kayak. They don't have a fish finder. They have a little 4-inch fish finder, and they're landing 5 and 6 pound smallmouth. Just because you have more on your kayak doesn't mean you're a good angler. But don't misquote me. That doesn't mean don't have nice things. You can have your big fish finders. You can have your live scope. You can have your motors. All that is great. I love it. I love talking about it. But I would be lying if I say that there's not times where I'm out there on the water that I'm wishing I had a simpler setup, because it takes too long to launch, it takes too long to get ready, it takes too much to put everything back in the truck. All that stuff runs through my mind occasionally that I wish I had a simpler setup. Now, one thing that you could do if you could swing it budget-wise is to have a minimalist setup for a kayak, and then have maybe your setup that's a little bit more in-depth with the electronics and everything else that you have with it. So that means having 2 kayaks, but a lot of guys like having a secondary kayak anyways, either for rivers or for taking their wife or their kids or some guests and things like that. So you can have the simpler setup for your guests and the more in-depth setup for yourself. That's just one way to do it, but ultimately what I'm trying to say is wait until you're 100% comfortable in your kayak on the water before you start adding. And don't think just because this brand dropped this brand new whatever that you need to add it to this kayak, because ultimately the question is it going to make you a better angler? You have to decide that. And mistake number 11 is overcomplicating your electronic setup. There's a lot of ways to wire your kayak. There's a lot of ways to do it, and you might be like me, not an electrician at all. You don't know a whole lot about that stuff. Well, there's a simple solution to be able to rig all your electronics to your battery, your fish finder, your live scope, your power pole, lights, phone charger, GoPro charger, all that stuff. And the solution is Yak Power. I installed it on this kayak 2 times because the first unit ended up, I outgrew it, and I went to a bigger unit. I'm gonna get it on this setup really soon. I have it on my autopilot, and I don't regret it. I love Yak Power. And what Yak Power is essentially, it's a switcher for your electronics. So all these 5 connectors that are sticking out here, those are connected to your electronics, and you can run them through your kayak. And then this main long terminal right here goes to your battery. And what you tell your Yak Power switch to do is which electronics you want it to power and when. You can have one of these rigged up to your lights, one to your GoPro, one to your fish finder, and say you want to turn off your lights when the sun comes up, you just hit the little button and it turns off just like that. So this is their smaller version. This is up to 5 accessories on here. That's big enough for most people. I had that when I started out, and I had it for about 2 years, and it was great. I upgraded last year on this kayak to an 8-gang switch, which means I can have 8 electronics on there. So this is my next one that I'm going to be installing on this bad boy right over here. So again, you could fit 8 different things. It also works via Bluetooth remote, so you could do it right on your phone. It's all plug and play, incredibly easy using SAE connectors, and that's it. I have my nav lights hooked up. I did have to drill a hole for the power and a little hole for the screw right here. I have this double USB port, so it's USB-C on the bottom and USB-A on the top, 3.0, which is great. This is the bigger of the holes. I think it was 1.25 inches, but I also have these little button lights that are Yak Power. I hit the little button on the switch and it lights up this whole deck. So I have one here on this side, and I also have one, if you see right here in the corner, and one here as well. So they sell all the lights, they sell this charger, they sell the wireless charger for your phone, they sell all sorts of things, and they make it easy to connect. It's all through their SAE connection. So after you actually drill the hole, that's the hardest part. After that, you just run the wires and you connect them right to these little ones right here. And this tells you what number it is on the remote. So this is 1, 2, you have S, you have your M and your B. So you can set it up whichever which way that you like. And hey, if you outgrow it, the great thing about this is that then you can just buy the 8-gang switch later and you don't have to reroute everything. You just have to add the extra connectors that you wanted to add. And Yak Power just makes it simple to order, put together a bundle. It shows you exactly what connectors you need. It's so easy to use, and you get a discount if you do it through their system builder. And for a further discount, you can use BDF5, which gets you 5% off anything you buy on their website. I'll link it down below, and I'll link down the videos doing the installs for this Yak Power system as well. Rigging mistake number 12 is a huge one, and it's so easy to overcome. It's not installing a keel guard on your kayak. This is the keel guard on my Old Town PDL 120, and you can see how beat up and chipped up and wrecked it is, and that's just after a couple years of use. If you don't add this on there, that damage goes to your kayak. And guess what? This keel guard is replaceable. I can peel it off, I can scrape off the glue and put on another one. But if this wears down on the kayak itself, you're talking about a whole nother ballpark of issues on this kayak, taking in water, potentially even leading to like catastrophic failure later on. And keel guards are incredibly easy to install. This is a DIY one that I made. I just formed it with a heat gun very carefully without burning my fingers, and I shaped it to the keel, put on some marine glue and put on some Gorilla Tape, and it held it on, and it's continued to stay on there after many years. Now, if you want something that's an already done solution where you don't have to mold it to your kayak, look at something like Navarre Kayak Fishing. He makes them for Old Town. I think he makes them for Hobies as well. And there's other manufacturers out there that might make one specific to your kayak. But don't wait in installing one, because you could do some damage quicker than you could realize on your keel. And the last mistake when it comes to rigging your kayak's a big one. It can leave you stranded out on the water. However, it's super easy to overcome. It's having a repair kit on your kayak for your kayak. A lot of things could happen on the water, from a broken prop to a loose screw to a bad connector for your electronics. A lot of small inconveniences, but they can also end your day on the water. So you should have a repair kit with you at all times. It's so easy to store too. I literally have mine in my Black Pack Pro, and I have it labeled as repair kit. Easy as that. Have it in my Old Town box that came with this kayak many years ago. But I put together a little repair kit of what I deem to be important when I'm out there on the water. Simple things, but all things that can make or break your trip when you're out there on the water. Okay, so first things first is if you have a motor, take extra kill switches with you. This is for my Newport NK180 Pro. I have extra terminals for my battery along with some extra screws. I have an extra knob in case one of these puppies break off. I have an extra knob right here. Blue Loctite. I have batteries, AA batteries, AAA batteries. I have the smaller batteries, the 2032s for the remotes and the lights. A little screwdriver is a great thing to add. Electrical tape, because even if you're not doing with electrical connections, you can hold something together long enough with this. However, my favorite one, zip ties. I have had to use zip ties many times for little small inconveniences, but I've been so glad that I've had them with me. I have extra Sharpies in case I'm doing a tournament and I lose my Sharpie or forget it or it gets wrecked. Little Allen keys, just like this one right here. I have extra dielectric grease, which, believe it or not, I've had to use that, not necessarily on the water, but I get to the kayak ramp and I notice that my connector's dry and I don't want to put in, the dry fish finder connectors in there and possibly break off a pin, or so I just put it on there, and I'm glad I have it. So those are like the essential things that I would have on there. You can add your own list of things that you think is a good idea to have. It's gonna vary for everybody, whether you're powering or you're pedaling or you're paddling, but you wanna cover your bases because you don't wanna ruin your day on the water simply because you don't have this incredibly cheap and easy repair kit with stuff that you already have at home. And to take it a step further, if you have a trailer like I do, it's not a bad idea to have extra parts and tools in case a hub goes bad or something comes loose, or extra marine grease to throw in your hubs as well when you're out there and maybe you're not home. And if you thought this video was helpful, YouTube thinks you might like this one right here. So until next time, guys, peace and God bless.